Hello everyone, welcome to the Galapagos webinar part 2. It's great to be here. My name is Dominic Hamilton. I'm the Deputy Minister for Promotion in the Ministry of Tourism here in Ecuador, here in sunny Quito. And I hope we've inspired you this morning with this lovely shot of some sea lions sunning themselves on the beach. We thought we'd give you a second webinar on Galapagos, get down to a bit more nitty-gritty, hopefully answer some of the questions that you've had, some of the doubts. It should be quite short and quick. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you very, very much for participating. We've got a good group of people online today, and so let's start. Just to give you a run through what we'll be looking at today, we thought it'd be interesting to look at the types of cruises that we have available in the Galapagos between expedition cruises, scuba diving cruises, expedition cruising with scuba diving, the famous island hopping, and day trips. Also, we wanted to look at the boats, talk to you a bit more about the different boat options that you have, because it can be quite confusing with about 70 craft plying the waters of the Galapagos in the moment. And also look at the land options. Land has become even more popular than cruising over the last years for various reasons, and we thought we'd give you a bit more detail of what those options look like. And some final extra information as well. So on to the types of cruises. Here, there are kind of three ways of dividing this, but we've actually made your life easier and divided it into two in terms of sizes. But if you look at these expeditions, at the moment the national park rules every ship has a 14-night itinerary, and what happens is that the cruise operators divide those 14 nights into different segments depending how they want to manage it. Some of them just do a plain 7-7 in 2 itineraries. Most of them do combinations of 3 itineraries. So you could be looking at a 5, a 7, and a 4, something like that, etc., depending on what kind of experience the boat tour operator wants to give you. And so it's important to know in that context what island you're going to visit, or your guests are going to visit during their itineraries. And some islands are more apt for, they have more snorkeling or kayaking opportunities. Other ones are better for wildlife. Other ones are more interesting from a geological point of view. So you need to do your research always on finding out what those itineraries are. And also where they start and end is important, especially we'll touch on that when we get on to extensions or land options. So in general, when you're on board a boat, whatever the size, you're talking about 2 visits in a day. The boat will move to a location, anchor in a bay, and then people will disembark from that in the morning and have a visit. Could be 2 hours walking around. It could be up to 3 on some circuits, which are longer on some islands, or they might be combining 2 hours, say, with a snorkel before lunch, and then everybody goes back on board. The boat will then move to another location. Could be another island across the way. It could be another landing site, a designated landing site on the same island, and the same thing happens again. Everybody gets into the pangas, the dinghies, and then gets down onto land. And generally, I think on the first 2 days, it's a truism that it seems quite complicated when you're on board, and you get confused between, have I got my binoculars, my camera, my sun hat? Have I put my sunblock on, etc.? And after, like, on the second day, people get into the rhythm of it and start enjoying it a bit more. But guests should be made aware that there is a whole drill, if you want. There's a whole operation involved in getting passengers onto the island, which consists of stepping off from the boat onto these dinghies. So that's another consideration for older guests or guests with mobility issues. You need to let them know that they will be physically active during their stay in the Galapagos. And also that would reflect, I think, on what time of year is best to go. You should always try and talk to your travel agent or your specialist in the Galapagos. The rougher times of year, ironically, when most people come. So from June to about September, the seas tend to be a bit rougher with bigger waves, which can prove more challenging when getting off and on and off boats, so take that into consideration. As we say, you've got a whole world on the boats between the expedition experience, the meals that you'll have on board, breakfast, lunch and dinner, everything happens on the boat in general, and you've got the activities that you can do within the day with the guides, and often the briefings and conferences will all happen on board as well. So to give you an idea of what that might look like, as we said, you can divide these 14 nights in any which way a tour operator wants to. There you can see a southern itinerary, the orange one, starting up in the north in the central islands around Baltra, and then going down to Floriana and Hispaniola with San Cristobal. The purple one goes all the way up to Genovesa, a beautiful island up in the northeast, as well as combining some central islands like Rabida and the famous pinnacle rock of Bartolomé. And then the western islands round Isabella. It's a beautiful trip, possibility of seeing whales in the channel between Fernandina and the seahorse-shaped Isabella, and amazing landscapes around there. Obviously, that's often going to be a longer trip because the boat has to travel large distances. Don't forget how big the Galapagos archipelago really is. So you can see that there are several options. Of course, those two of those, or even three of them, there are cases of people deciding to sail away in the Galapagos for a whole 14 nights, which is pretty amazing. But otherwise, be aware of all those possibilities that you have. And also, if you look at the map here, think about, say, the yellow itinerary ended in San Cristobal, but it began in Baltra. So that's something to take into consideration for when we talk about land. Now, for scuba diving outright, the options are to go on what would be called a liverboard, and the options in the Galapagos are for 7 nights only. You can often squeeze in up to 5 dives in a day if you take in doing night dives as well. And the itineraries tend to vary, but they will always try and they do, all the boats that operate those 7 days itineraries will take in the far northwestern islands of Darwin and Wolf. We'll go back to the map in a minute. And the same as the expedition cruises, you've got your meals on board, your transfers in the dinghies, all your activities take place with the boat in mind, and you can also, of course, talk to the boat operator about renting the scuba diving equipment or photography, depending on your needs. So here are all the dive sites in the Galapagos, and as I mentioned, right up in the top corner on the left in the northwest side of Galapagos are Darwin and Wolf. Those are the famous islands that are only reachable aboard liverboards, and that most people who are interested in scuba diving make a beeline for, because that's the best chance of seeing huge schools of fish and whales. The whale shark is often the best chances of seeing the whale shark in Galapagos are up there, but also huge schools of hammerheads and other fish as well. And the liverboard will often take in different islands on the way and on the way back to Darwin and Wolf, usually from its base where it starts its itinerary in Baltra and in the central islands. There is another modality for scuba diving, which consists of going aboard an expedition cruise. And here, basically, you have to imagine that often within a normal itinerary of an expedition, they might have one day in Santa Cruz, in the port of Puerto Ayora, or docking nearby, where there will be a land visit. They might visit the Charles Darwin Center in Puerto Ayora, or they might visit the highlands to see the giant tortoises. So what the scuba diver does is swap out that visit on that day, and the operator can coordinate with a scuba diving operator, whether that's in Puerto Ayora or in San Cristobal is the other option, and just go for a day dive with that tour operator, make sure they're back in the afternoon in time to get back on board the ship, and continue with their usual cruise. So that would be the other way of doing it. It requires more coordination. Not all boat operators do it. Some of them decide that it's too much of a headache and they just want to keep their passengers in one place. So it's something you can find out about. But it does give you an option of seeing the islands, because it's important to note with the liveaboards, you're not doing the normal visitor sites that you would do aboard a normal expedition cruise itinerary. You're pretty much limited to doing scuba diving, which is amazing, but you're not able to do any land visits. So if you wanted to really try and combine the two, and you're interested in seeing some of the wildlife on the islands, but you'd also like to try and get a day in diving, then you'd need to talk to your tour operator about the possibility of doing the day that they've got in Puerto Ayora on Santa Cruz Island or on San Cristobal Island, and swapping out that and doing a dive instead. And that would, again, you would be limited to geographically to the islands, the dive sites, sorry, that would be near Puerto Ayora or Puerto Vaquerizo Moreno in the case of San Cristobal. So there you go. Those are the options in the two islands that we talked about, and then there are several, half a dozen at least dive sites nearby that local tour operators take you to. Onto island hopping, which basically consists of using several, probably two, because you've got to, I think the name implies you hop from one to another. So you're at least going from 2 islands, possibly 3, and there are 4 inhabited islands. We'll just check those on the map in a minute. And 2 of those can be reached by air, which is Santa Cruz with the airport of Baltra. We'll look at it on the map now, and also San Cristobal. And they can be reached from air from the continent, but you can also fly to Isabella Island as well. We'll see that on the map as well. But Floriana, the island to the south, isn't a possibility in terms of airstrip, so you can only get there by boat. And essentially the logic of this, the attraction of island hopping, is to be able to discover a bit more about local life in the Galapagos Islands, a bit more about culture. There are reasons for not going on a cruise, particularly if your passengers happen to suffer from seasickness. Then this, going on a cruise for 7 days might be their idea of hell, and you can give them the option of visiting the Galapagos, but doing it from land. And we'll see the last the modality that we're talking about when you stay on land and go off on day tours, on special boats to do day tours. So island hopping can be a combination of several ways of seeing the island. So you would fly in perhaps to Baltra, make your way across to Puerto Ayora, maybe have a couple of days exploring Puerto Ayora, and we'll look at the attractions of Santa Cruz Island in a minute. And then after that, you would take one of the fast speedboats that connects Puerto Ayora, say, with Isabella Island, and you would then have another 2 nights or 3 nights to explore Isabella Island, and then either come back to Santa Cruz, or even perhaps make your way down to Floriana, exactly the same, have a couple of days to explore, maybe do a day trip, relax, do some snorkeling, and then make your way back to an airport nearby. So all the islands in the Galapagos are different. They have different characteristics. They feel different. The populations are different in terms of sizes and activities in terms of character. So by doing an island hopping, you're getting a feel for these different ecosystems, for these different the different character of the different settlements that we have there. So that's one of the modalities that has some practicalities to take into consideration, which are that the speedboats take a good 2 hours or up to 3 hours. In the case of Floriana, right down in the south, they can take up to 5 hours over the rougher sea months of July and August. So you need to take that into consideration when recommending them, that people are going to be at sea in speedboats for quite long periods, and everything's about managing expectations, as we all know, in travel. So it's essential that they should have that expectation of being, bouncing around on a boat for a few hours is part of the island hopping modality. They can take the flights. These are very small. METB is actually the make of the aircraft, if I remember right. They're kind of Cessna type aircrafts. There are different sizes. I believe the largest one is a 10 passenger. So if you have a group, they'd need to go in two separate flights. but the flights are not long, and they're pretty spectacular way of seeing the islands from the air. You should see them not just as getting from A to B, but also a pretty amazing experience of seeing these volcanic islands from the air. And also you need to think about the timing of the boats. The boats leave islands and do their particular route at certain times, and so you need to, it's not just a question of, oh, I finished my cruise at midday in Puerto Ayora, I can get a boat to Isabela, because the boat to Isabela leaves actually earlier in the day. I think, you know, the first one, the boats leave at about 11 o'clock, which combine with the first flight that comes from the mainland. So in that case, you have to build in a night in Puerto Ayora and go the next day. But those are kind of nuts and bolts considerations that you should be thinking about when talking about island hopping. And also that there's great demand for the tickets, so you should work with either through a hotel that you're working with or a tour operator to book the fast speedboats, because they do get booked up with local traffic and tourist traffic. So those are these are the modalities that you could do by flights between San Cristobal, Baltra there in the middle, and Isabela off to the west, and then the ones that exist in terms of boat connections, maritime connections between Puerto Ayora right in the middle, Floriana at the bottom in the south, San Cristobal to the east, and Puerto Villamil in Isabela to the west. Those are the options you've got to get around. And finally, when we're talking about maybe not island hopping, just staying on one island, such as Santa Cruz or San Cristobal, any of the inhabited islands, once you're there, you can do day cruises or daily visits around those. So thinking back to the map, you have to think maybe you've got a radius of a maximum 2 hours sailing time from any of those spots. Where there are most of the day tours aboard the yachts that have license, these are all licensed yacht by the national park. They have a specific itinerary. They can only go to one island on one particular day of the week. Where you'll find most of those are in Puerto Ayora, in Santa Cruz, and in Puerto Vaquerizo on San Cristobal. But you can have smaller motorboat, outboard kind of boats that can also do day trips, both from those ports and from Floriana, and particularly from Isabela. They're quite a good selection of motorboats that can take you along the coast. And normally, as I say, only about 2 hours away from radius away from those ports, and there you're following the same kind of way of visiting Galapagos. You're with a guide. It's the same as a cruise kind of idea, where you get off in the morning at this island. You enjoy all the visit, maybe 2.5 hours with the guides, and then normally you get back on board. You would have your lunch, depending on the quality of boat or the price. You could have a whole buffet lunch, or you might, if it's a more economical boat, you might just have a sandwich and a juice. But everything happens with the knowledge of the national park, and is still controlled in the same responsible way by them. And there's normally a chance to snorkel. That, you know, something to check on is whether the boat operator includes snorkeling and shorty wetsuits, the thin, smaller wetsuits that tend to get used in the Galapagos when the waters are cooler, which is from about June to September, October, when it's more comfortable to have a thin wetsuit on. You should always find out in all the boats whether those prices are included or not. Those are the extras that passengers should be aware of. Some boats include them, some boats don't, so make sure your guests know which is which. The day tours, obviously, if you're looking at 4 days in the Galapagos or 5 days in the Galapagos, by staying on land and then just doing the day trips, that would be a cheaper option than doing a cruise. And you can find day tours from about $80, but going right up to about $300 for the higher end yachts, which would have air conditioning and buffet lunches and good, you know, the best snorkeling gear and probably the best guides as well. The two should go hand in hand, between the quality of the guide and the price you pay, or the quality of their English. Do take into account, I think it's important, the travel times between islands. If you're staying in Puerto Ayora, many of the tour boats that do day trips will actually dock They'll moor, sorry, in the channel towards Baltra Island on the north side. So you've got a travelling time of about 40 minutes in a bus, in a coach, to get to the other side of the island, and then you get on the boat. And most times the boat will come back to that same spot, and then you're taking 40 minutes in the bus over the hills, which is a lovely trip, but it's another 40 minutes. So you do lose, compared to a cruise, you do lose time getting from A to B, let's say. Whereas obviously with a cruise, you're anchored right in the bay, the shallow waters nearby, you hop in a dinghy and you're away. There is a difference there that should be taken into consideration. So again, these are the main inhabited islands, and these are the ones that you can do this kind of day trip from. Now I'd like to show you a bit more about the boats that are available to you. We've actually divided these into two. Some people might divide them into three, but for the sake of clarity, we've done it this way. But let's just run through, the pros and cons of these two types of ships. So small yachts we've divided from 10 to 50. Other people, as I say, might divide. There are a range of medium yachts that are in the 30 to 40 passenger range as well, so that should be taken into consideration. What are their strengths? A more intimate experience between everybody on board, a more personalized service, you could argue, everybody will get to know your name because there's only 16 people on board, or even 10 people on board. They'll remember what kind of cocktail you want in the evening, how you want your coffee in the morning. And a lot of them have a lot of character, as you can see from the picture of the sailing boat at the top. That there are different types of boat, more romantic maybe, although strictly speaking, due to the way that the itineraries happen in Galapagos, using sail power to get around is uncommon. Even the sailing yachts will always use their motor power, but if they can put their sails up and save themselves a bit of fuel, and it always looks pretty with their sails, then they will. But normally they're using motor yacht. But certainly the smaller yachts will have a lot of character. You've got good possibilities to interact with your tour guide and your crew on the smaller boats. You can often anchor closer to the disembarking points on the visitor sites. That's something to take into consideration, although it's not a huge difference. And then some medium boats and larger boats will have doctors on board. If that's a consideration for your guests, or it gives you that extra peace of mind, then that's something to take into account. On the smaller boats, there isn't room for a doctor. Weaknesses, if you get seasick easily as the passenger, then the smaller boats tend to get tossed about by the currents and by the waves more than a larger yacht. If you're not particularly social, if you'd like to have more space and more decks in order to be by yourself and read your Agatha Christie novel, then smaller boats don't offer as much flexibility. Everybody's pretty much piled together. Some like that, some don't. So sound out your guests about their preferences. And obviously on smaller boats, cabins and social spaces around the yacht are going to be smaller. It's very rare. Only at the luxury end will you get a small number of boats, small number of passengers, but also be able to have kind of suites and more luxurious accommodation. Moving on to what would be called in the Galapagos an expedition cruise ship, which is everything from 51 up to 100 passengers. It's important to note that is the actual limit of the larger ships in the Galapagos, and at the moment there are only four expedition cruise ships that are up to that size. So if you feeling safer on board a larger ship, you've got a doctor on board, you'd like to have more social contact, you've maybe got greater amounts of services. The medium size and the larger yachts can have space to put in a running machine. They might have a different kids room, they might have a different video room, a library, things like that smaller ships can't accommodate. And also the sense of stability on a larger yacht, they will always be more stable than smaller ones. It's important to know that even though you are maybe with 90 or 100 other passengers, you're still divided into a maximum of 16 people, which is the maximum allowed per guide by the national park. And often it's worth inquiring. Some of the bigger boats and the luxury end improve that ratio, so they might be as low as 12 people per guide, which I think is very important. But excuse me, when taking into consideration the age and the hearing abilities and the windy conditions of being on top of a cliff face, it's very important to have those small group sizes in the Galapagos, and of course to obey the rules of the national park so a guide can keep an eye on everybody. You've got the options of more larger cabins and more social areas, as we've mentioned, and I think for families traveling together with teenagers or children, the larger boats tend to be more popular. But that doesn't mean that a smaller yacht can't be an option, but you might find on a larger yacht the likelihood of being able to share with other families is greater, so that's something to take into consideration, and plus the social areas might be more apt for children's activities. The weaknesses, the anchor sites are going to be a bit further out because they can't get the draft of the boats won't allow them to get much closer, but that's not too much of a consideration. The greater times in terms of logistics, that is true. When you've got 100 people that need to get off in quick succession, you're going to have longer times, whereas on a smaller boat, if you're just 16 of you, for instance, you all get in the dinghy with one guide and off you go, and a larger boat you're going to have different groups and divided up with different guides, so that can take a bit longer. And perhaps there are less options for that intimate experience with the tour guide and the crew on a one-to-one basis, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a fun and friendly experience on board a larger boat. Just to give you an idea of how the boats are divided in terms of service and their price ranges, we've divided them roughly into 4 categories, from economic through to tourist class, first class, and luxury, and we've used the 7-night cruise there for you, so you can see that the Galapagos is by no means a backpacker destination when we're talking about boats. It's a great opportunity for you to make very healthy commissions by booking guests onto the Galapagos. So you put a family of 4 onto a luxury class yacht for a week, and you're talking a good commission, particularly when you add in the Galapagos flights, which are about $500, hotels in Quito or Guayaquil, plus the international flights. There's a good incentive for you to sell the better yachts or a range of yachts and get your commissions. Looking a bit at the different islands, what the options are, we thought we'd run through them a bit. So here again, to refresh your memory of the inhabited islands as they go, it's important to remember, even though these are highlighted, that 97% of all the area is a national park. So when we highlight this island, actually only tiny percentages of it are inhabited in any way or have a road that might cross across it. Otherwise, everything is just wildlife in a very natural state. Just to talk about Santa Cruz, the largest tourism island really, and the largest population, the one right in the middle that we looked at. Puerto Ayora has a population of about 15,000 now. Everybody uses the airport of Baltra, which is just about an hour away by car and by ferry. You have to cross over by ferry to the island of Baltra. There's a good range of accommodation there and now in Puerto Ayora, and all sorts of options going from $300 up to about $300, sorry, $30 to up to about $300 per night per person. You can find everything there. And we're going to go to a map in terms of places to visit. Puerto Ayora, as you can see, right down in the south. I hope you can find it now. And if you follow the line of the road up to the north, you can see the symbol for the airport, which is Baltra. In the middle of that, you have what are called the highlands, which, given the lack of islands in the middle of the Pacific, when the warm air from the sea hits the highlands of Santa Cruz or any other island, it rises and it condenses and it creates cloud, and so it therefore changes the whole ecosystem on the island. So it's fascinating to be able to visit. But those are generally where what are called farms or reserves, where the giant tortoises are. If you follow the road out to the west, El Chato, La Caseta, those areas are where the giant tortoise farms tend to be, where people will visit them. Los Gemelos, there are two amazing sinkholes. Galapagos is completely volcanic, and so you have these strange geological formations. Moving to the east, Cerro Crocker is a fantastic trek that can be taken, which has lovely views of going down towards the south, towards the sea. Also the area as we go west towards the beach called Garapatero. That's a nice beach to get to. Cascajo on the way there. There's the chances all along that road for kind of agri-tourism, for visiting coffee plantations. There's coffee plantations, very good coffee in the Galapagos now, and also some sugarcane to see how they used to make sugarcane traditionally. And there are also mountain bike or biking routes along that. That's actually an asphalt route now down to Garapatero, but there are other paths if you want to do some biking away from asphalt, then that's an area where that activity takes place. And then in Puerto Ayora, as such, it's a busy, colourful, fun port down on the south side of the island. There you'll find the Charles Darwin research station. There's a great fisherman's market, which is very interesting to see all the pelicans that come and try and grab pieces of fish from the fishermen as they chop up the fish, as well as sea lions as well. And then there are bay tours that you can do around there. As we've said, you can go off scuba diving from there. There are lots of painters, artists, artisans based in Puerto Ayora, which makes it an interesting place to shop for crafts and for art. And then if you look beyond that, Bahia Tortuga, the famous Tortuga Bay, is a short walk from Puerto Ayora. It's a beautiful beach. One part of the beach is better for surfing and not good for swimming. And then there's another part of the beach which is a shallow bay, which is lovely for children or going for a kayak and relaxing, but with marine iguanas and perhaps a sea lion making a visit too. So there are plenty of activities on Puerto Ayora to consider if you're going to recommend people have a land-based experience. So you've got activities that we mentioned: mountain biking, we mentioned trekking, we mentioned surfing as well. Those are all possible there, as they are on nearly all the islands. Moving on, San Cristobal, which is the island over to the east, is another island which has a growing population, but much smaller, of about 5,000. The airport is literally right in the middle of it's very close to the town, only 5 minutes away, and there's increasing options for lodging there, over 30, and prices are probably lower than they are in Puerto Ayora. So going back to Santa Cruz Island, options for accommodation are both in Puerto Ayora, but also in the highlands. There are several initiatives that you can mention, like the Royal Palm Hotel, like the Safari Camp, like Montemar, and also Picaya, the very luxury lodge that opened recently. They're all up in the highlands, and you also have the option down in Puerto Ayora, being down by the sea. That's important to know. In the case of San Cristobal in Puerto Vaquerizo Moreno, everybody's down in the port. No one's got any lodging up in the hills so far, and there are great sites that you can visit, as well as the same, pretty similar to the Charles Darwin, of a tortoise breeding farm as well. That's interesting. Nearby, La Loberia, Tijeretas Hill, all of those can be walked to, can be visited with guides, or in some cases on your own. And there's great snorkeling as well nearby, and scuba diving, and some surfing as well to be enjoyed in San Cristobal. Isabela was the seahorse-shaped island off to the west of the archipelago, and Puerto Villamil is right down in the south, in the kind of foot of the seahorse, and it's again even smaller than San Cristobal in terms of population, only about 2,000 inhabitants. The airport's right there in the town. It's very close to the dock as well, the municipal dock, and there are growing options for lodging as well. There's starting to be options up in the highlands. Scalicia Lodge, for example, is opening any minute now in the highlands, as well as I think there's one called Chontaduro or Campoduro up in the highlands as well. And otherwise, everybody's along the very attractive beach. I think that's its biggest selling point of Puerto Villamil is unlike Puerto Ayora and San Cristobal, the beach is a beautiful long stretch, and the town kind of lines that beach, so it's right there, and it's very attractive at any time of year. And you've got, again, price ranges and more modest. You have to think, as you're getting away from civilization, then you're possibly going to have more modest accommodation. The restaurant offer won't be as sophisticated as it is in the smaller, in the larger towns of Puerto Ayora and San Cristobal. There are lovely, visits to be made very near the town. You can go up into the highlands, see the huge caldera of Sierra Negra. You can go horseback riding there, mountain bike riding, doing some great trekking, scuba diving from there, and there are several sites that you can you can visit by motorboat as well nearby. Now we come to the smallest of the island of Floriana, right down in the south, which is really teeny in terms of only having about 100 inhabitants. So that, if they can double their population very easily in Floriana. There are only 5 hotels on this island, which again are range more modestly, more basic in terms of guest houses, and in pricing also could be up to $200, we reckon, in the market at the moment there. And as we said, there are no airports to get to Floriana. You have to get there by boat, and there are some great visitor sites like Puto Cormorant Point, Post Office Bay that you can see pictured here, and the very famous snorkeling and scuba diving site called Devil's Crown, which is definitely regarded as one of the best in the entire archipelago. So that was the run through. We've talked about everything that you can do, the flora and the fauna, bird watching, trekking, the beaches, that is people perhaps looking for a more relaxing holiday, the idea of staying on land, that you've got those options. Perhaps Isabela is the most attractive out of them, given that the other ones are short walks away, but the other islands have those options as well. In the case of Floriana, is actually the beaches. You're right on the beach as well. And then we've got cycling, surfing, sea kayaking, snorkeling, very easily done, scuba diving in terms of a day trip, and of course everything that you'd like to learn about the Galapagos and conservation can be done on board while you're on land. We thought we'd finish with some handy tips. The photography and filming, if you're planning on bringing journalists through whatever PR initiatives that you have, it's important that you know there is a whole formal application that one has to go through. It can take about 2 months to do. It can involve a deposit depending on what kind of filming. If you're going to do commercial filming, then the Galapagos does have a fee for that, and you need to take time in order to do it. And of course, we'd also obviously ask everybody to be respectful when engaging in photography. Everybody gets most people get very excited when they're on the islands, and so they want to get that much closer and just a little bit closer, or that much further off the path. And it's important to remember how fragile the national park is, and how important it is that everybody obeys the rules. Another thing that we wanted to point out, I think, for scuba diving, that it isn't for everybody. It's important to know that the currents in Galapagos are very strong. It's an amazing experience. I've been lucky enough to do it several times, but it can be disconcerting, and it can be dangerous as well. So do make sure that people who are going scuba diving in the Galapagos either do a refresher course a few hours before in their home countries, or definitely make sure that it's part of their of what they're going to do in the Galapagos. They shouldn't just dive straight in. They should have at least a couple of hours with a PADI or a dive master, just to refresh them on their safety and their basics before heading off to the dive sites, which, as I said, are amazing but can have very strong currents. So that's it from us in terms of this Galapagos Part 2. I do hope that it's been useful to you. You can also always find this webinar and the directory of services of businesses on our website, which we hope is always going to be proved useful to you. Do send us your feedback, your wishes for more of this, more of that. We need to see a bit more of that. And obviously the archive of all our newsletters, the magazine, the digital magazine, and all the webinars. If you need to share them with your colleagues in the office, do make the most of the archive that we have. We'd like to also share with you we're going chocolatey as best we can next week. We can't send you all chocolate for the next webinar. We wish we could, but it would be great if you could go out and buy some Ecuadorian chocolate. If you live in the States, you could get that in Whole Foods. Look out for the great Ecuadorian brands, because we'll be telling you all about the new project of Ecuador Land of Chocolate, which consists of all these experiences that are related to chocolate, whether going into a shop and buying it, whether doing a chocolate tasting experience, whether you're going to a farm and meeting the local people, learning about the whole process, because most people, believe it or not, or most people who are honest would admit they don't actually know what kind of fruit a chocolate looks like. It's most famous and popular of our world's delights, and people don't know where it comes from and what it looks like and how it grows. So that's what we're going to tell you, and it's all part of this great new product that we're bringing out to market with the help of all our tour operators that are coming on board. So do join us. That's going to be, depending on the language, on the 24th or 25th of November. We look forward to you joining us there for that. And finally, it's important when you click, if you could click on it, we've got a whole survey that we'd be really grateful if you could take 5 minutes to fill out. It's a whole survey about how your business is doing, what we're doing, if we're helping in any way, what your sales are like, what we could do better. Is really valuable for our planning for next year. We very much appreciate your time. And also at the end of this webinar, you'll have the choice to tell us how we've done. I hope we've done a great job with the second webinar this year. We've got a good group of people together with us. So tell us if this webinar has been useful or not. The survey is now up on your screens, so do let us know and give us your feedback. We're after chocolate. That's it for this year, but let us know what we should put in the mix next year. It can be, we can do another Galapagos if you really want to, and we can start looking, even more at all the islands again in more detail. That's all we've got time for today. So thank you very much. Are we going to take some questions? If you'd like to send us your questions, I hope you've done so maybe during the webinar. Let's just have a quick pause while we look at those, and we'll be back in a minute. Están haciendo. Ya. ¿Y qué preguntas? Okay, so we've closed the. Thank you very much for your feedback. We've had a resounding yes of 97% that think we've done a good job today. So thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to share our knowledge with you, improve your knowledge, and help you sell the destination better. Wow, we've got lots of questions. So I'm not going to be able to get through this in the time that we have. Someone is asking about blood type is mandatory information, and they don't agree with that being. I haven't heard of that, to be honest. I'm a bit surprised. I mean, I can only assume that it's something that they would like to know in case anything happens in order to be able to treat a guest faster. But I haven't heard of that being a requisite. Um, and my dear friend Pancho dos Debes, thank you for pointing out that today it was the last day of the Beagle in the Galapagos, Charles Darwin's famous visit in 1835, and 180 years ago. And so we're celebrating that recently. In the last month or so, we've been celebrating Charles Darwin's visit every day, and a very, very significant visit, and something that can enrich any passenger's experience. Obviously, is finding out about Darwin. I would highly recommend reading The Beak of the Finch, or watching the Darwin film, which is fantastic as well, to get into that kind of evolution and the wonder I think that the Galapagos can cause. It's life-changing wonder. It's all recorded, yes. We've got, as I said, on the webinar, on our trade site, go into webinars, you'll be able to find this webinar as well as part 1 and other ones. The flights, we've got at the moment Avianca and Tame and LAN. We've got 3 airlines flying scheduled flights daily to the Galapagos, some of them twice daily. They leave early in the morning from Quito or Guayaquil. In the case of Tame, they fly via Guayaquil from Quito, so it takes a bit longer. But you've got plenty of options there, but obviously book ahead to avoid disappointment. If a passenger is short on time with 3 to 4 days, which itinerary in the Galapagos is best? That's a tough one. There are lots of answers to that, but I would always try to say to give them a bit more time. It seems such a shame to come a long way. The logistics, as you've heard, of getting to the Galapagos, the flight, getting to Balta, going over to Puerto Ayora, you're not seeing the animals, for the best part of the first day. So do try and persuade your guests that they should program more time for the Galapagos. Is the easy answer. I think there are cruises that have wonderful itineraries in 4 days, 3 nights, so you can see the archipelago, you can see it, get a sense of its wonder, and the same goes for land-based. So it's hard to be able to answer without trying to find out from your guests, find out what kind of experience best suits them. Where do I get the percentage or the commission of the percentage? Not from me, nor the team of the ministry. We're here to tell you all about it, but obviously there are very interesting, there are good commissions for Galapagos. Obviously, the more volume that you deal with your negotiations, the better you can negotiate your commission. I think the tour operators out there know that better than me, but if you're a travel agent and booking through a tour operator, of course you should be commissioning. And if you're booking straight, if you're a travel agent with a client and you're booking through an Ecuadorian agency, you should be negotiating good commissions as well. Proof required for certifications for scuba, yes. All the dive operators, whether in Puerto Ayora or San Cristobal, definitely need to have PADI certifications, or the whatever the international one is, and that's an annual thing that they need to have. What else have we got? Pit craters, I've been corrected. I think I called them sinkholes, which are Los Gemelos, but they're sinkholes, just in case anybody had that. They're pit craters, they're not sinkholes. Thank you for that. All the hotels in the Galapagos you can find in the directory that you can find on our website. They should be all the ones that have licenses. We try and keep that database constantly up to date. If you find anything that isn't, then please shout. But that's a very, very good resource for you, and whether you want to find the links that you can then send your customers onwards from there, then it's a very good resource, and we've invested a lot of time into getting it right. So hopefully we can. Car rental, no, not necessary. The distances, there are very, very few cars because of the nature of Galapagos, and you can just hiring a van to take you over one side to the island to the next is very feasible, even with limited English. There's only one road, for example, going across Santa Cruz Island, and also always try and do it through a travel agency there, or tour operator there, in order to ensure the best experience, of course. But I would leave that in the best mode of transport in the Galapagos for me is a bike. I would encourage everybody to, you can hire bikes in Puerto Ayora and poodle about the town very happily between your hotel and the Charles Darwin or wherever you need to go. Medical facilities for travelers on the inhabited islands. I think they go in from, we went in order from the most inhabited to Floriana, with it's only 100 inhabitants, so it's literally only got a little clinic, and it'll have a Spanish-speaking, doctor of part of the Ecuadorian government health service. So it's going to be pretty basic. You should know that. Whereas in Puerto Ayora, you've got a hospital with a lot more sophisticated equipment. You probably have doctors who speak English there. There is a hyperbaric chamber in Puerto Ayora, and in Puerto Vaquerizo as well, if you have any problems while scuba diving, or guests do. But again, I think you should, be preparing for the Galapagos. You have to remember there were, a few hundred people living there 50 years ago. It's come a long way, but it's still a long way from the mainland. And if you have any serious illnesses, then the best thing is for the guests to be flown to Guayaquil or to Quito and have more sophisticated treatment there. The places, there's talk of the Galapagos Big 15, and that's an interesting initiative. So we have most of you will have heard of the Big 5 for Africa, of the animals that everybody wants to see in their African experience. Well, in the Galapagos, there's a way of seeing it where you say you've got your Big 15, which actually proves how amazing the wildlife is and the number of different species that are fascinating in the Galapagos for their uniqueness. So I can't go into the details now, but it's always the idea is that by seeing more of these species, you're going to have a more enriching experience, more memorable experience. So look out for those when you look at the itineraries that we talked about right at the beginning of the 3-day, the 4-day. Obviously, the more days that you're going to stay in the Galapagos, the more likely you are going to see these species. But you can also choose wisely, depending on the itinerary that you choose, can help you see more of those species as well. Please organise more lectures about the coast. Yeah, we can do that for next year. We're going to do chocolate next. We can touch on activities in the coastal plains then, and we'd be glad to do something looking at the coast. The website, just in case you missed the address, I'm showing you on screen now. You can either type trade.allyouneedisecuador.travel without the ES, which would be Spanish. So we can do it that way. And also we've got ecuador.travel/trade. You can go at it that way as well. And it'll be linked. It's linked in this webinar. In case you miss it now, then please do come back to it. I think we're there, everybody. Thank you very much for all your questions, for your compliments. It's really great it's a bit strange not being able to hear people and have the face-to-face interaction that we all crave as humans, but it's great to know that you've got some good feedback and we've done a good job. Keep believing in Ecuador, keep selling Ecuador, let us know how we can improve, and have a great day. Thank you very much.